Okay, so we're starting to do the record. So all we're going to do tonight basically is I want to just go through the process one more time, make sure you're understanding what you're doing in relationship to this. And basically, you know, and I want you to think about this like, okay, how do we transfer this into my daily work where I'm at, either from a leadership point of view or suggesting things to do. So what you basically started out doing was you did prototype stories. So you created a prototype. You know, we have, you know, both classes, you know, put together different types of stories, and those stories came about because you looked at access, you know, the needs coming out of all the material that we gave you, whether it be, you know, the Wall Street Journal stuff, your own readings, the videos, etc. Then your team should have been in the process of developing a context. So, for example, you know, one of the teams has this virtual university, which is kind of unique. One's out on a ship. Other ones are looking at extending school into the community in relationship to work. You know, doing you know, prototyping activities within businesses, etc. And then basically you're trying to gain some inspiration in relationship to doing this. You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it, etc. So that's the first thing that you were doing. You presented your stories, and then you got feedback from your colleagues. So that feedback process then basically was designed to help you to begin to evaluate your idea, to prioritize components within it based off of what people were saying, possibly iterate again, you know, maybe make some tweaks to it, make some changes, and then you began to work on doing the final plan. So starting to work towards that final plan basically is your final presentation. And so that's being generated from the feedback that you went through. Then what happened and where you are now is basically building a final design, which really comes out of looking at, okay, what's the physical space? So one team, if you're staying with this, your physical space is going to be, quote, in cyberspace. Another one's looking at physical space in relationship to a ship. Or other ones are looking at physical space in terms of normal schooling process, but then moving physical space into work environments, etc. The information flow, you should be talking about that in terms of your project. And what I mean by the information flow is what is the, and we'll use the vernacular, the curriculum that we're exposing, you know, students to no matter what level they're at. So, you know, so if you're on that ship and you're moving into Togo, I believe is where you guys are going, well, the question is, what are the kids learning? How is the information organized around that? Then when you get on land, what are you doing? You know, how are you, you know, designing that? So I want you all, you know, to at least address, i.e. curriculum or, you know, the flow of information. So it's a good way, you know, of thinking about that. So as you look at that process then, what you want to do is think about the system of work that's involved there. So, you know, and what I mean by system of work is, okay, what do students do in this environment? What does the learner do in this environment? What does the learning facilitator, i.e. the teacher, you know, how is it administrated? So what's those systems of work that are in play within your new environment? And then, you know, as you said, obviously the leadership skills. What's necessary, you know, to make this work? Because obviously you have a different, all of you have a different model that functions differently daily. So therefore, how does the leadership change, and how is the leadership utilized in relationship to your final design, which then basically leads into me making this thing move. Whoops, hang on, there we go. So moves into really, all right, so the outcomes of this will be your final project, but also the thing I want you to think about is okay, how do you start? You know, how would you make this actually come into action? And then once you're able to begin to do that, what closes the circle is over time is that you, through evaluation, through looking at it, you might end up doing another prototyping story, you know, to continue this thing to, you know, to develop. So basically that's been the design process all the teams have been going through. And that it's a type of process that begins to make sense to you, you know, as a way of maybe even if you're a building principal, you know, working within a building, trying to redesign maybe the way in which we structure the day for learning. You know, if you're a superintendent, you might look at it in a bigger perspective. If you're a business person, you might look at it from the point of view of how do we link business to what we're trying to do in terms of the schools within our community. So this is the process that, in a very simplistic way, that you have been doing. So any comments, questions about what you're looking at right there? So all your teams are basically in that flow, particularly at the bottom there, building final design.
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure so you know how you're looking at that and doing that. Okay. So with that, then what I want you to think about is this process here, and what that comes down to is, so you're in this stage right now of, you know, you're defining what the success is in relationship to your project. So what you're looking at is your team's been sitting down, it's been mapping out the success of what it's going to look like. You're setting key milestones, basically. You know, when you think about system of work, when you think about curriculum, you're thinking about how are we going to get here. And what I think is important about this, and I sent, I believe, all of you an email about a real world case study, and that's that XQ Super School project. Because what I want you to remember, what you're doing in a very small way is to begin to teach you some types of skills that in the real world, here's this project that has emerged on the national scene. And what's going on with this project basically is that Steve Jobs Weiss Foundation basically said it's time to redesign American high schools. It's time to break away from the old model. So if you think about the videos that you've been watching, you think about Ken Robinson's videos, Russell Acuff's work, many of the things that you've been looking at that, in reality, here's a real functioning project, which is a prototyping activity on a large scale, and the outcome of your design will, if your team is one of the finalists, is worth $5 million. So you'll get $5 million to make this new high school to work. So when you look at the process of what they're asking for, in terms of this, once your concept is accepted, so once the prototype is accepted, then what they're going to be looking for, if your team is selected to go forward, is they want to know how you're going to deal with human capital and training. So what's your system of work? And then how are you going to train people to function in this new design? So they're going to ask for those types of things. Here's a second component they're looking at, and it's one I think all of you have probably, skirted around. But the question then is, what's your financial model? And through that financial model, how will it become sustainable in terms of your project? How will your project be sustainable in the long term once you're given $5 million to get it running? So the idea of the sustainability is linked greatly to the model of financing you're going to use. And then what they're also asking, which you're dealing with right now, is what's the facilities, what's the technology, and what is the nature of time within your particular model. So if you think of your own prototypes, what's the facility? So one group obviously has said the facility will be on a ship. Another group said that the facility actually will be in virtual reality. And that time, as you begin to think about this, and I just thought about this, in terms of your final project, you probably should talk a little bit about, how does time change within your model? So I think that becomes an important question to think about. Then the other thing they're going to want to know is, what's the governance? So how's this place going to run? What's the governance structure? What's, is it going to be a board of directors? What then is the organizational chart? What's the flow of power? What's the flow of information from the point of view of governance? So those types of concepts are important. The next thing they want to know about is the performance management and evaluation. So how do you know that we're reaching the vision and mission of what our school is going to be about? So when this XQ, New American High School, they're going to want to know how are we going to look at accountability structures in order to know that we're reaching our stated purpose and mission. Remember, I didn't use the word, we're going to use it to determine, performance per se. We're going to use it to gauge how our metrics are reinforcing our vision and mission and purpose, and help us to understand how we have to make adjustments as we go along. So that becomes an important component to think about. Then the last one is, okay, what's the implementation capacity? So if you think about, I'm going to go back to, the SS, whatever, I forget the name of the ship. But, so the question would be, as you think about your own project is, okay, what's the implementation capacity that's going to be needed to make it work? And so when you think about the interrelationship of all those things above, that becomes a very important component, because what you're looking at there is, what's the skill level, what's the experience level of all the people involved, and do they have the capacity to carry out our mission and our vision and our purpose? So my point of what I'm showing you right here is that in reality, here's a real-time project that actually is incorporating the exact same process that your teams have been going through in a very limited way. But in reality, here's a real life project that says, okay, we're actually asking people in this country and actually around the world to come up with a new redesign of American high schools that moves away from the industrial model. And that what they're looking for is the most innovative and creative and sustainable structure to allow that to happen. So I think that's important for you, as you think about what you've been going through for the last now 8 weeks, playing around with this, because this class is totally structured different than most of the other ones that you've been through. And the reason it's done that way, as I told you in the beginning, for both classes, is that I want you to experience as much diversion, or not diversion, but not convergent activity, but divergent activity, because so many times you don't have the luxury of experiencing what that's like. So that's one of the things, we want you to really think about as you're going through this process. So any thoughts and questions or just comments about what I've just said?
Can you go back to the last slide? This is Catherine.
Okay, you want me to go back?
Yeah, I just want to take a picture of that. That's it.
Well, I'm going to have these slides out for you tonight.
Oh, okay. That's
Okay.
fine. Sure.
Yeah, okay. So any comments about this? You know, it does make sense. I don't know. I don't know how many of you went out onto the XQ Super School project site, but it's kind of interesting because when you think about it, it gives a lot of the stuff that you were exposed to, like say the Jeffrey Sachs material, all the things that you learned, you know, coming out of 625, the things you learned in 800. Particularly when you look at Sengi's work around both ecological and economic sustainability. And then when you think about the divides that Otto Scharmer talked about, you know, with self to nature, self to others, and self to self, you know, you'll see where the XQ is looking at what are we learning from the neurosciences about how particularly adolescents learn, how what the brain research is really saying to us. And then therefore, from that brain research, how do we need to rethink the organization and the design of the physical structures? How and then do we begin to even think about rethinking the whole concept of assessment? Because there's a lot of movement now towards the use of gamification and virtual reality as part of the assessment process. Because the reality of how kids work with you know, gaming environments and how they get so deeply involved in the complexity of thinking that is needed to solve gaming problems that I know ETS, of which the project I'm involved in right now is one of the sponsors, because ETS is beginning to work on alternative assessments for kids that uses gamification and virtual reality so kids can demonstrate application of their understanding of information as opposed to the normal traditional static test that we give kids. And I think that's going to have some major implications, particularly in a work environment, particularly, you know, as work environments become more complex, the ability to test and train using virtual simulations will become more and more prevalent as we move forward just because of the technologies. So any comments, any thoughts on those crazy ideas I just gave you?
The piece of governance, so that's something we're going to establish, just kind of a hierarchy within our own organization. Is that what that piece is?
Well, the governance is look at it not so much, and I'm just showing you the components of what will go into the X School Super project, that what they're asking for. What I'm looking at is not so much the governance as okay, what type of leadership mentality, I'll use that word, or what type of sources of leadership are necessary to make your project work. So you don't need to necessarily get into the power structure of how it would be governed, but I'm more concerned about you just beginning to look at what the leadership capacity or skills that are needed to at least begin to entertain what your project is. Does that help?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, let me go to the next slide, because this is a slide we were curious about. So here's the question that we both want to pose to you. It's this: how do you want to present your final project? And let me just throw out a couple things, because a couple of you have, I believe, have people who are in California, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So, yeah, so what we were wondering, instead of doing one night, maybe do two evenings. One we would do at, maybe have two teams present at 9 o'clock at night, the ones that have California members. Do that at 9 o'clock at night and make sure it's done by 10:30, you know. So we do the two, and then we would do the other three next night at normal time, 6:45. Or there's another way of doing it. You know, you can think about is that what you do is that you put your projects up on you know, VoiceThread or how you're going to do them, and then allow everyone to have access to them so that they can give comment towards that. Then what we would do is, instead of you know, kind of like just doing the presentation, what we would have 2 sessions again, that would be maybe Wednesday, Thursday of the last week in the evening, that would allow us to discuss what we've seen in all the projects and do it as a final analysis and a sharing of perceptions about ideas. So it becomes a collective feedback loop, as opposed to, okay, we do the one at, you know, the one, so all the California people get involved at a time that they are able to do it, just to do, you know, a show and then get feedback, or have them publicly out there, let people all interact with them, and then just use a session that would allow for just, you know, feedback and final analysis. Now, what I want you to do is think about that. You don't have to make that decision right now, but I think we both would like to have feedback from the majority of you by, let's say, Friday, Saturday, the latest, and then what we'll do is on our voice announcement Sunday morning, we'll tell you how it's going to be. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Or do you have better ideas? I want to leave this up to you. All right, so what I'm going to do is, based upon the silent majority who is here, using a famous Richard Nixon statement, what we'll do is then and we'll both send out a reminder, an email tomorrow, telling you what the options are, and then I want the teams to, you know, you as an individual, give your feedback, which one you prefer, and then we'll let the majority process play out. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yes.
Okay, so what I'll do then is, obviously tonight, I will get this out to everyone and tell them that you must listen to the end of it, because there is a secret prize for you. And we'll go from there. Okay?
$5 million? Is that the secret prize?
Yeah, right. Oh, now who is that? Is that who just said that? I didn't see who.
Brian.
Okay, yeah.
That's the prize, right?
Yeah, well, no, that's good. We'll figure something out.
Okay, good. We're banking on that, just so you know.
It will be season tickets to the Phillies.
Oh, don't tell that. That was great.
So whatever we do, now I better watch it because I'm recording this.
You're recording it now.
So okay, so why don't we do that? That's basically all I wanted, you know, to give you for both classes, you know, for tonight, and then we'll both send these out and remind people what to do. So with that, I'm going to stop the recording, and if you